Hi guys, Ronnie here and welcome to the workshop. Today I want to present to you my brand new road bike for this season, and as you can see it's an S-Works Tarmac SL8. Compared to the previous years where I was on sponsored bikes, for this year I decided that I just want to be independent and use the equipment that I wanted to. Firstly because, well, last year I have had quite a lot of struggles with 3T and very tall stack height, and the bike's geometry just didn't fit me at all, which has caused me an injury basically, or a series of injuries that ruined my race season, and also kind of made my training a lot harder than it was supposed to be. So really not ideal circumstances. I have to say though that on paper the bikes looked just fine, and I didn't really see the issues until further down the line. So yeah, that's what is kind of my mistake, I guess. I thought that I could get away with the geometry that is well, not shorter but quite a lot taller, so I'm a lot more relaxed. Usually people find that relaxed bikes are more comfortable, etc. But for me, unfortunately, that's just not the case. I've been riding a very aggressive position for the past 7-8 years, and my body is just so used to that taking it out of that equilibrium just doesn't work. You know, because of the tall stack height on those bikes, I was not able to rotate my pelvis forward. The power was not coming. I was constantly suffering from kind of this burning sensation in my quads and legs. I had lack of recovery because I was not used to that, and because of the tall stack height, I was constantly, dropping my shoulders in and my neck in, and just caused me injuries and problems here. So yeah, it really wasn't ideal, and also because of the upright position, I wasn't particularly fast as well. So even if I had the power and the training, the results were not where I wanted them to be. So overall, that was kind of a blind track for me, to be honest. And there's nothing wrong with those bikes per se. For 90% of the riders, those, and particularly recreational riders, that geometry and bike style will be just fine. But that's not what I'm looking for in a bike, and it kind of felt really limiting. So now for this year I'm basically starting with a blank sheet of paper and with all the components that I chose myself. So this is a kind of a flashy edition of the SL8 frame set. I chose it because I just like this paint job. I think it will look great in the videos and on Instagram, so that's pretty much the reasoning behind it. Also, it doesn't add too much weight because the bare unpainted frame weighs 660 grams. This is 720, so I'm willing to take the sacrifice. As for the SL8 itself, it was one of my two options, I would say. I really like the new Factor Ostro VAM version 2, and I really like this one, the SL8. Geometry wise, they have been now kind of equalized. Previously the Factor was a bit more relaxed. Now they're quite on point, especially in the 52 size. So both are really aggressive, really long, which I do need for my position. But in the end, I just went for this one because it was immediately available and I like the color. And also aerodynamically, they're quite evenly matched according to tests, but this one is a fair bit lighter. So if you have the same aero, I'm not a weight weenie, but with the same aero, if you can get a lot lighter bike, then it's obviously a win. So that's the short story behind it. Obviously, the SL8 is not nearly as good in terms of value because the frame sets cost pretty much the same, but with the Factor that includes the bar and stem, The seat post, it's the same here, but you also get a ceramic split bottom bracket, bar tape, etc. A few minor things, which none of that you get here. So yeah, that's kind of a downside of the SL8. You don't even get the stem anymore, which you did get with the SL7. Not that I would use it anyway, but still, it kind of boosted the value proposition. So with the frame selection done, I first started building it up with the components that I carried over from the previous bikes. So the big part of that obviously is the head wheel set. This is the new Vanquish 62 Pro series. The front wheel is pretty standard and uses the GP5000 TTTR 28mm on the front, Silica speed shield, tubeless valve, of course, tubulite tire insert, so exactly as it's been used before. The rear wheel is a bit more custom because I do have a carbon TI hub built into that. Previously, I had this rim with the classified rear hub, but that classified system I have transferred to my time trial bike and the Aerocoach disc wheel, and I will talk about also, because the TT bike with the Kratos crank has no option whatsoever for front shifting, so it's a better match there. And yeah, this rim was basically stuck without the hub, so I went with Carbon TI because they're well priced, they're super high quality, and they're very light and reliable. So basically for all or almost all of the custom wheel builds that I've done in recent years, I've done them on the Carbon TI hubs for exactly this reason. So I'm actually contemplating switching over to the front hub as well from them, because it's a 50-gram weight saving and it's not a big cost for me. And yeah, it's quite a simple wheel build, no special parts needed. Not that there's anything wrong with the head hubs, they're just a bit heavy. The rear is, I think, 100 grams lighter than the head, so that helps obviously, and doesn't have a negative impact on anything. It's nice and stiff. I've also upgraded all of the bearings to cycling ceramics, so that also aids the efficiency a tiny bit. So that's more or less the wheel setup. You can notice that I have standard Shimano rotors on here. The reasoning for that is no other really than availability. I have had pre-ordered Carbon TI rotors in various sizes and iterations, aero ones, standard ones, months ago, but the ETA for them is still a long way out. So I just had to use some rotors that I had left over. I can't use the 140 that I have in the Colnago, because with the Tarmac SL8 you are tied to a 160 front rotor because of the specific brake adapter, which is aimed at weight saving, but then again it forces you to get a big rotor, so it's a bit of a wash. So anyway, I have the standard Shimano rotors now. I'm not amazed by the performance, I have to say, because both the Hope and the Carbon TI rotors perform much better in terms of brake power and modulation, and also heat management, but for now they have to do. The rest of the Dura-Ace group set is pretty much a carryover from basically all the way back from the factor from 2 years ago. So it's a full Dura-Ace 9200 group set, except from the cranks. So you got the levers, sprint shifters, front mech, rear mech, and cassette and chain. So all of those. Yeah, starting from the front of the bike, again, you're probably quite familiar with the shaping of the SL8. It's in this smaller size, it's not so pronounced, but we get quite a big, deep fork. This is basically like a bench fork, or very similar to it, even deeper on the front end and the head tube area. And one thing I didn't really like with the SL8 was the standard stem. And even if you go for the Roval Cockpit, firstly, it has very limited options in terms of sizing, and secondly, it doesn't hide the brake hoses in any more of a refined way than the standard SL7 or 8 stem. So instead of that, I found this neat little kit. So MacCAD uses this SL8 headset transition, which enables you to use the NV in-route stem, which is a super neat unit because it completely hides it, and it has a very nice visual blend to it. As you can see, it's really quite neat. And this is an NV in-route 130mm stem, except that I've upgraded the bolts to black titanium ones just to increase the visual appeal. It also has this neat little integrated Garmin mount, and yeah, I do say Garmin because I'm using the 840 now on the road bike, since I have to use this anyway because of the aero sensor testing suit that we have, which uses it. So the Wahoo stays on the time trial bike. I like both really, so no issues there. The handlebar is the MV SES Aero 35/40, which means that it's 35 centimeters in the hoods and 40 centimeters in the drops. I've been using this handlebar with some gaps in between for, I would say, around 6 years or maybe more even, and I think it's the best kind of off-the-shelf road handlebar that you can get on the market right now. It's narrow at the tops, wider at the drops, with just the right amount of flare and just the right geometry so you can easily reach the brake levers. It also has this section where you can just rest your forearms for an aero position. It has a really nice aero shape on the tops, so really it's just my top recommended handlebar. I sell a ton of these in the web shop, so and also on customers' own builds. So really highly recommended. And it's just a nice visual match with the stem, makes for a really nice and comfortable front end. And I have to say, particularly coming from other bikes previously, it's also unapologetically stiff. It's massively stiff. So if you're a sprinter, this is the handlebar and stem combination for you. For rough roads and the rough descents that I sometimes ride, it might be a bit too stiff even, but for those I will have a different wheel set and tire combination anyway. But if I mentioned stiffness already, that's kind of the whole theme of the bike. It's certainly no endurance bike in terms of ride comfort. You definitely get road feedback in there, but the reward for that is excellent snapper response in climbing and handling, changing direction. It's a super stiff bike. It's not for everyone. For my kind of riding, for high performance, is definitely what you want. And I guess it's a bike basically born out of pro rider feedback, and it shows. It's super light as well, which also adds to the stiff feeling. And yeah, I've ridden almost 2 seasons on the SL7, and I really liked that bike. But then I preferred the Ostrovam to it just because it was a bit more planted, a bit more compliant. This one is not really like any of them. It's just super stiff, very fast as well. I'm averaging 35-36 km per hour on flat roads at zone 2 power at around 200 watts, which is it's just super fast. The aerodynamics, certainly, even if the shapes don't look very aggressive, they just work. There's no way around it. Specialized knows how to do these things. You can see that with the Shift TT, which is a very fast bike, and with this one, the previous iterations, it's just, you can't go around that fact. So yeah, stiffness is there. Okay, so that's basically the front of the bike covered. If we go back further down, the down tube, interestingly, is more of a round section than before, even compared to the SL7. Same for the top tube. So they say that these tubes don't really have as much of an effect at the drag numbers compared to the front, which is kind of makes sense. So they're just made to be as light as possible and as stiff as possible, which also just feels when you're riding it. And yeah, the bottom bracket area is really quite slender, and it uses a standard BSA bottom bracket shell, which is nice because it's the easily the widest or the type with the widest availability out of any other system. So you get a lot of options there. Right now, as you can see, I have a bit of a mix of components on there. So yeah, the cranks. So previously I was back and forth between the Alto Carbon and the Alto 30s. I like the look and the aesthetic and the weight of the carbon ones, but they don't really work with my narrow stance because the pedal thread is kind of inset into the carbon, and this causes me a lot of rubbing with the shoes. So yeah, obviously I could go around that by just using some spacers to go wider and mitigate that, but it kind of doesn't work for me aerodynamically because it widens my Q factor unnecessarily. So then I went back to these standard Alto 30 aluminum cranks, which arguably don't really match the aesthetic of the bike like this and are quite heavy too. And I have a solution for that on the way, which is a completely new thing for me. I haven't used it before, but more on that later. So for now, it's kind of a temporary setup. I also have the Ultegra 5339 chainrings on there. Again, that's just a leftover that I had laying around, and they will stay on the bike until I get a replacement, or the replacement that I want to, which will be a lot lighter and a lot more aesthetically pleasing with carbon chainrings and everything. All the good stuff. And this is basically a training setup. The crank length is 170 for now. I can get along with those just fine. For this more aggressive position, the new crank will be 165, just to have better hip stability and more comfort when I'm fully tucked, which helps in the breakaway position. The power meter is the Power2 Max NG, so I'll get different iterations of that. In fact, I already do have it, just it doesn't fit this crank. Another set of chainrings that I did try is the Aerocoach 5440, and they're really great, really nice and narrow, but this gold finish on them just really totally clashes with the rest of the bike, so I just couldn't stand them aesthetically, to be perfectly honest. So I took those off, and hopefully I shall soon receive the unit that will be much better in that regard. The front max standard durace, as I said. Here I had to do this little hack again, where I removed the hateful cable guide and I just zip tie the wire to the inner plate of the mech, just to keep it from rubbing the tire, which could of course lead in a catastrophic scenario for the wire itself. This way that doesn't happen. The bottom bracket is an SLF Motion BSA 30, just to match this particular crankset. It's a gold finish, so again, totally clashes with this bike, but it's what I had on the shelf, so I wanted to have this bike rolling. I'm going to change it for a black unit when that arrives. The bottle cage, singular for now, is a Carbon Works unit that I've been using for years now, and I really love them. Super lightweight, Very neat design and quite a good match for this bike. 8 grams total, so it's pretty much the lightest thing you can get. The reason I don't have two at the moment is I have one pair that I send over back to Simon, to Carbon Works, for the repair. During a bike wash session, I managed to snag my t-shirt in one of them and break it, and I've done this twice, so it's me being clumsy, but he'll repair that for a really fair amount, so I'm going to have that back soon. Anyway, it's quite cold right now, so I don't really need more than one bottle. I can just take a 1 liter one and it's fine. Back to the Seatpost area. So actually, if you look at the Tarmac series, they've kind of for a while been using this integrated wedge clamp design, and unlike other brands, this one works just fine, and it's also beautifully machined down to the last millimeter and gram of material, so quite an impressive engineering job there, and it's just really, really secure as well without crushing the seat post, which also counts. As you can see, my position is also not very keen on the nowadays trendy slammed forward saddle positions. Those kind of positions just don't work for me at all. So as you can see, I run quite a lot of setback. So I'm also using the standard setback seat post. And in fact, I have ordered a lightweight Derimo seat post. Firstly, to save some weight without sacrificing anything else. So it's just, I think, a good upgrade. I've had it on the SL7 and on the Factor also. Secondly, apart from the weight savings, the Derimo seat post also tends to be more compliant. So on a bike like this, that helps for sure, particularly at my weight, which is not a lot, admittedly. And I think it's a cool upgrade. On top is my preferred saddle of choice for road bikes. This is the WOW Mags, and I've been using it for a year and a half now, basically, and I just love it. Super lightweight. It has just the right amount of flex, just the right amount of padding to work, and it's just a really beautifully made part. And when all of this is in its final state and in a bit more cohesive package, then I think it will be a real nice piece to top it off. Right now it's still admittedly a bit of a mishmash, but we're getting there, or we should in the next few weeks. Talking about the contact points, the Wahoo Speedplay aero pedals are a staple for me now and have been for the past 7-8 years at least. These ones are also outfitted with the Dulite titanium spindles, which save a bit of weight admittedly, but they also bring the Q factor down, which is what I need in order for my position to work with my narrow hips. So that's a slight upgrade there. I've also experimented with their bow tie, or this engagement plate made out of titanium, but first it wears quite a bit quicker than the steel one, and also the engagement is not as crisp as with the standard one, so I'm not really bothered with that at the moment. Real is a custom built one, as I said. The TTTR 28mm tire and the Tubulite tire insert, the valve cover and everything is exactly the same as on the front wheel. The set is the standard 1130. Here I don't really have a reason to go for the 1134, because even though I do have long climbs here, they're not very steep, so 34 is not needed. For the rear mech, I also have this standard specialized direct mount, because I just hate, the Shimano B knuckle when it's just out there. So every time I have the option to change that to direct mount on a bike, I will do that straight away. Obviously, the Dura Ace rear mech is a classic. So I'm sticking with that. It performs flawlessly, and on top of it, or in the bottom should I say, I have the SLF motion aero cage, so that's also a neat little upgrade. So yeah, that basically covers most of the parts. I also talked about the titanium bolts that I've put into the MV stem. I also have them basically on the brake flat mounts, also in the adapter and in the rear. So they also are color matched basically in these oil slick edition. I think it matches the frame in this lilac and pink color. So yeah, that's just a neat little upgrade. As you can see, the gold BB right there doesn't quite match. In fact, the whole bike is kind of a mishmash in terms of parts, but it rides great. I just feel at home with it. Finally, the position back where I'm used to. The power is coming. The training is going fine. So yeah, this is the bike I'll be going along with. If you want to build one of your own ones, like this one, or maybe something else that matches your specification, of course, we can do that for you if you reach out to the website, to links below. And of course, if you want to see more updates about this build and see it in its full form when it's finally not made out of these off-the-shelf leftovers, but the full specification, then of course stay tuned and subscribe to the channel for upgrades. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.